Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
Life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs, and my current situation is a prime example. Who would have thought that moving into a quiet suburban neighborhood would lead to an all-out war? Yet here I stand, embroiled in a fierce conflict with a group so absurd, so comically inept, that it would be funny if it weren't so infuriating, my Homeowners Association. This isn't just a minor disagreement or a simple misunderstanding. No, this has escalated into a full-blown battle, complete with secret meetings, underhanded tactics, and enough drama to fuel a soap opera for years. The HOA, which should be a force for community betterment, has instead become a tyrannical entity ruled by pettiness and ignorance. The cast of characters in this suburban showdown reads like a list of cartoon villains. There's Karen, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, whose shrill voice can be heard complaining about everything from the color of someone's mailbox to the length of their grass. Every day brings a new absurdity, making me wonder if common sense has left town. It's a daily struggle against the forces of suburban insanity, but I'm determined to stand up to the madness. It all started when my wife and I moved into this beautiful mountain community. The views were breathtaking, the air was crisp, and our neighbors seemed friendly enough. At first glance, everything appeared perfect, a slice of suburban paradise nestled in the mountains. However, this picturesque facade masked a troubling reality. Beneath the surface of our idyllic setting lurked a dysfunctional HOA, run by a group of self-appointed emperors who seemed to have missed the memo on how to actually manage a community. Their reign over our neighborhood was characterized by arbitrary rules, lack of transparency, and a blatant disregard for proper procedures. As we settled into our new home, we had no idea that we were stepping into a hotbed of mismanagement and petty power struggles that would soon disrupt our peaceful mountain life. From day one, something felt off. There were whispers about the HOA, but nothing concrete. It wasn't until we received our first bill that the red flags started waving frantically. The amount seemed arbitrary, and when I asked for a breakdown of the expenses, I was met with blank stares and mumbled excuses. "Oh, don't worry about that," said Karen, the self-proclaimed head of the HOA, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We've been doing this for years. Just trust us." Her words dripped with condescension, as if I were a child questioning the wisdom of adults. Karen stood there, perfectly coiffed hair and manicured nails, the very picture of suburban superiority. Her smile never reached her eyes, which remained cold and calculating. Trust them? Ha! That was my first mistake. I should have known better than to take anything at face value, especially when it came to money and community management. The red flags were there from the beginning, waving frantically in my face, but I chose to ignore them in the name of being a good neighbor. As I stood there, processing Karen's dismissive response, I felt a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. Something wasn't right here, and I knew it. The lack of transparency, the casual disregard for proper procedures, the expectation of blind trust. It all added up to a recipe for disaster. The depth of the HOA's mismanagement was far greater than I could have imagined at that moment. Karen's dismissive attitude served as merely a surface-level indicator of the extensive dysfunction festering within our community. Her cavalier response hinted at years of unchecked power and a complete lack of accountability. Looking back, I realized that my failure to press for more information that day allowed the situation to deteriorate further. Had I been more persistent, demanding transparency and proper documentation, perhaps the chain of events that followed could have been prevented. Instead, my initial compliance set the stage for a cascade of issues that would soon engulf our entire neighborhood in chaos and conflict. As the months went by, the issues piled up. Our mountain road, which required regular maintenance due to its steep incline and exposure to the elements, was falling into disrepair. When Hurricane Helene hit and caused 3 major landslides, I expected swift action from the HOA. Instead, what we got was a guy named Bob with a rusty tractor. "Bob's been taking care of our roads for years," Karen explained, beaming with pride. "He's practically family." Her words were laced with a warmth that seemed genuine, but beneath the surface, I sensed a deeper motive. Karen's pride wasn't just about Bob's longevity or his familial status. It was about maintaining a status quo that benefited her and her clique. By presenting Bob as a trusted figure, she was reinforcing the notion that everything was fine, that no changes were needed. As I watched Bob at work, his rusty tractor chugging along the mountain road. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The road was a critical piece of infrastructure, prone to landslides and erosion, especially after events like Hurricane Helena. Yet, here we were, relying on Bob's best efforts rather than professional expertise. Karen's assertion that Bob was practically family only highlighted the lack of professionalism and oversight in our community's management. It was a cozy arrangement, perhaps, but one that put everyone's safety at risk. I watched in disbelief as Bob haphazardly pushed dirt around, whistling tunelessly and occasionally stopping to spit tobacco juice onto the ground. This was their idea of road maintenance? Shouldn't we hire a licensed contractor? I asked, trying to keep the incredulity out of my voice. Someone with experience in mountain road repair? Karen's eyes narrowed. Are you saying Bob isn't good enough? He's been here longer than you have, mister. And that was that. No professional assessment, no proper repairs. Just Bob and his tractor, giving it their best shot. But the road was just the tip of the iceberg. As I dug deeper, I uncovered a web of mismanagement that would make any rational person's head spin. There hadn't been a proper board meeting in over a decade. The financial records were a joke, a jumble of hastily scribbled notes and unexplained expenses. And don't even get me started on the lack of transparency. We need to see the HOA's financial statements, I said at an impromptu gathering of neighbors. We have a right to know where our money is going. The response was a mix of apathy and hostility. Some neighbors just shrugged, while others, like Tom from down the street, actually got angry. Why are you stirring up trouble? Tom growled. Things have been fine for years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it was broke. Very, very broke. I tried to reason with them. I pointed out that without proper financial management, we were all at risk. What if there was a major emergency? What if we needed legal representation? But my words fell on deaf ears. The situation escalated when I decided to run for a position on the HOA board. I thought, naively, that if I could just get elected, I could start implementing some changes from the inside. It seemed like a logical step, a way to address the issues I'd observed and make a positive impact on our community. I spent weeks preparing my platform, talking to neighbors, and building support for my candidacy. Oh, how wrong I was. My optimism about the democratic process within our HOA was about to be shattered in the most frustrating way possible. As the days ticked by, I waited for an announcement about the upcoming election, but nothing came. No flyers, no emails, no community bulletin, just silence. Election day came and went. Without an election, the realization dawned on me slowly, like a creeping fog. There had been no voting, no opportunity for new voices to join the board, no chance for change. It was as if the entire concept of an election had been erased from existence. When I confronted Karen about it, she just smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, we decided not to have elections this year. Maybe next time." Her casual dismissal of such a fundamental process was infuriating. It was clear that the current board had no intention of relinquishing their power or allowing any form of challenge to their authority. This wasn't just mismanagement anymore. It was a deliberate subversion of the community's right to representation. It was infuriating. The more I pushed for transparency and proper management, the more resistance I faced. And then things took a dark turn. One evening, as I was walking my dog, I heard a commotion from Karen's yard. To my horror, I saw her deliberately unchain her massive Rottweiler, pointing in my direction. "Go get him, Brutus!" she shrieked. I've never run so fast in my life. My poor, confused dog tucked under my arm as we sprinted home. When I called the police, Karen played innocent. "Oh, Brutus must have slipped his leash. These things happen." But it didn't stop there. Soon, I was hearing whispers from other neighbors. Apparently, Karen and her cronies had been spreading lies about me. The rumors were as ridiculous as they were damaging, each one more outlandish than the last. "I heard he's trying to take over the HOA to embezzle funds," one neighbor told me in hushed tones. This particular piece of gossip stung deeply. Not only was it completely false, but it also painted me as some sort of criminal mastermind, when all I wanted was transparency and proper management. "They're saying you want to triple our fees and use the money to build a private tennis court," another confided. The absurdity of this claim would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. I had never even mentioned a tennis court, let alone expressed any desire to raise fees. It was madness, complete and utter madness. The level of misinformation being spread was staggering. These weren't just innocent misunderstandings. They were calculated attempts to discredit me and turn the community against my efforts for change. The fact that some of my neighbors were buying into these outrageous claims only added to the frustration and sense of isolation I was feeling. The final straw came when I discovered that several homeowners hadn't paid their dues in years, some for decades, with no consequences. Yet Karen and her gang were hounding me for payment like clockwork. That's when I made my decision. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. I stopped paying my HOA dues. 6 months went by, and guess what? Nothing happened. No legal action, no liens, nothing. Because they couldn't do anything. The HOA was so dysfunctional, so poorly managed, that they had no legal standing to enforce their rules. The best part, the constant harassment stopped. No more fake friendly chats with Karen as she tried to pump me for information. No more passive-aggressive notes left on my door. They were giving me the cold shoulder. And it was glorious. But I wasn't content to just bask in my small victory. I knew that the issues ran deep, and they affected everyone in the community, whether they realized it or not. So, I took the next logical step. I hired a lawyer. My attorney, Rebecca, was a firecracker of a woman who specialized in HOA disputes. When I laid out the situation for her, her eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "Oh, this is good," she said, rubbing her hands together. "This is very, very good." Rebecca explained that the HOA's years of mismanagement had left them vulnerable. The lack of proper board meetings, financial records, and selective enforcement of rules meant that they were operating outside the bounds of the law. "We can potentially have the entire HOA dissolved," Rebecca explained. "Or, at the very least, force a complete restructuring with proper oversight." It was music to my ears. We started by sending a formal letter to the HOA, demanding access to all financial records and minutes from board meetings for the past 20 years. The response was predictable: silence. Next, we filed a complaint with the state's Attorney General's office, outlining the years of mismanagement and potential fraud. This got their attention. Suddenly, Karen and her crew were scrambling. They tried to hold an emergency board meeting, but it was too little, too late. The years of operating in the shadows had caught up with them. As word spread through the community, other homeowners started to wake up. People who had been apathetic before were now asking questions, demanding answers. The tide was turning. Tom, who had been one of my biggest critics, showed up at my door one evening, looking sheepish. I think I might have been wrong about you," he mumbled. "Maybe things weren't as fine as I thought." It was a start. The legal process is ongoing, but changes are already happening. A state-appointed auditor has been brought in to go through the HOA's records, or lack thereof. There's talk of holding proper elections for a new board, with oversight to ensure fairness. As for Karen and her cronies, they're not going down without a fight, but their days of unchecked power are numbered. I've even heard rumors that some of them are trying to sell their homes and move away before the full extent of their mismanagement comes to light. It's been a long, stressful journey, but I can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Our community deserves better, and we're on the path to getting it. So, to anyone out there dealing with a dysfunctional HOA, know this: you're not powerless. It might take time, it might take effort, but you can fight back. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to seek legal help if necessary. As for me, I'm looking forward to the day when our HOA operates as it should, transparently, fairly, and for the benefit of all homeowners. And who knows, maybe I'll even run for the board again. This time, I have a feeling the election will actually happen. File a lawsuit for all past payments you have made after the corporation closed. Add interest every month, and costs. And file. Have a sheriff serve the paperwork. Name every board member. They are on the hook for every dollar they stole from every property. I saw two old-timers having a very loud argument in the gin mill one afternoon. After about 15 minutes of this entertainment, one headed towards the door. As he opened it, the other guy shouted, "You miserable!" The guy at the door spun on his heel, pointed at the seated guy and hollered, "Don't you ever call me by your mother's pet name again," and slammed the door on his way out. The entire pub instantly burst out laughing so hard we had tears in our eyes. Best retort ever? These HOA tyrants aren't just incompetent, they're downright criminal. I bet if you dig deep enough, you'll find they've been embezzling funds for years. Why else would they refuse to show financial records? They're probably using our hard-earned money to fund lavish vacations and fancy cars while our roads crumble. It's time to get the FBI involved and investigate every single board member for fraud. Let's see how smug Karen looks when she's facing federal charges and the prospect of jail time. Don't let them intimidate you. Fight fire with fire and expose their corruption for all to see. Man, your HOA sounds like it's run by the mob. Releasing vicious dogs on residents? Spreading malicious lies? That's some next-level evil right there. I wouldn't be surprised if they start leaving horse heads in people's beds next. You need to document everything and get the media involved. Nothing scares corrupt officials more than the threat of public exposure. And while you're at it, start looking into their personal lives. I bet you'll find all sorts of skeletons in their closets that they don't want coming to light. Fight dirty. It's the only language these HOA goons understand.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.